You're listening to Going Mental. This is your host, Eileen Kelly. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. So, I'm in a new relationship, and something I've learned is that we all carry stressors, from friendships, work drama, family, whatever life throws at us. Being a human can be really stressful. And when we keep those things bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Having therapy twice a week has been extremely helpful, not only in managing those stressors, but also helping me show up as a good partner, a good daughter, and friend. I'm able to have a safe space to get things off my chest so that I can show up in those relationships as the best version of myself. If you've been thinking of starting therapy but are overwhelmed where to start, give BetterHelp a try. So it's entirely online. You don't have to leave the comfort of your own home. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/goingmental today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/goingmental. Welcome back to Going Mental. This is Eileen, and I'm going to jump right in, but I'm doing a solo episode today. I'm obviously in my bedroom. Chi-Chi's at the end of the bed. And I get nervous recording video for these, so I'm going to try not to look into the camera, but it's on. You can see me. And I have my cup of tea, and let's get started. So I didn't put out a podcast for 2 weeks because I was traveling, and also it's the summer, and I feel like take the summers off if I can from podcasting, just because it's very difficult to secure guests. People are traveling, they're in and out of town, and it's just more difficult than during the school year to get guests to come into the studio. And I feel like people's schedules book really far in advance during this time. So I thought I would talk a little bit about what's going on for me, some anxieties I have, also just exciting news. I am much more excited than I sound right now, but I'm trying not to have an intense Valley Girl voice, which people tend to comment on. So if I'm more calm and collected and don't sound as excited, I feel like my voice sounds a little bit lower, softer than when I'm going up and down, up and down. And my perfect son is trying to bring me a toy right now, but mommy has to record. So I posted something on TikTok a couple days ago. I don't really use the app much, but I said something like, oh, I'm going on a trip. I think I posted a packing video, and I said I was going on a little trip with my boyfriend. And several people commented, and they were like, wait, you have a boyfriend? What, girl? You need to update us on your podcast. So I feel like I've been sharing on Instagram a little bit here and there that I have a boyfriend. But yes, I do have a boyfriend. I'm going to keep that relationship private, like the inner workings or things that go on in the relationship. I did want to update you guys and just tell you that I do have a boyfriend, and I'm happy to speak on my own experience and navigating a relationship when you have mental health issues, and navigating specifically with something like borderline or BPD, which is a disorder where you tend to be very dysregulated in romantic relationships. So how I'm able to navigate this relationship, which really feels like my healthiest relationship I've ever been in. I can talk a little bit about that, and then I also want to share about my move to LA and the anxieties I have around it, and the fact that it's coming right up. It's mid-June almost, and I'm moving, probably start my move in August, officially fully move in September. And so I want to talk about some of the anxieties that have been coming up for me, and I've never lived there before, and I don't know, moving to a new place that you've never lived. Like, I'm moving across the country. I know I'm from Seattle and technically from the West Coast, but I've never lived in LA. Um, so I want to talk about that a bit. And I also want to talk about, some of the anxieties have to do with the fact that I am in a new relationship, or I have a boyfriend. And while I want to keep my relationship private and something that we've agreed on, and I just want to keep it like sacred and it's not open to the public. He's a very private person, and I respect that. He didn't sign up for, the public persona and the public of it all. But, being in a new relationship and then moving has brought up a lot for me. So those were kind of my topics for the day, but I'm going to jump right in. So I know I did an episode a few months back where I talked about how I was dating someone over the summer and we broke up. Nothing dramatic, but that relationship ended and it was actually very short-lived. I actually am in a relationship with my ex-boyfriend, so I got back with an ex. And I thought I could also speak a little bit about my experience getting back with an ex, and that comes with a list of difficulties as well. But basically, so my boyfriend and I, we dated many, many years ago for around a year, and then we broke up because my mental health was at its lowest point ever, probably. And so we broke up. I went away, and we've always kept in touch and been on good terms, and I always was like holding out hope, or I thought maybe we would get back together. And so here we are, we're getting back together, or we have gotten back together. I don't want to share too many specifics, but I will say that what has worked for me and why I feel like the relationship is so positive and the way it's going is I feel like when you get back together with an ex, you need to know. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in romantic relationships. And what's helped me is like knowing the specific reasons why we broke up in the first place, knowing why we haven't been able to make it work in the past, and kind of having that list of things, and then knowing that those things have changed. Honestly, I was like, if I'm gonna give this another shot, like I don't want to just get back together for like 3 months, have like a last hurrah, and then be like, oh shit, we have all of the same issues that we had several years back. And so that was something that was really important to me that I communicated. And I always knew all along why it couldn't work. Like I didn't feel in the dark about like, oh, he's telling me it won't work because of this, but I don't agree with that. Or I feel like it's not going to work because of this and he doesn't agree with that. Like we were very aligned, and why we knew. Like I think so much of relationships is about timing. Like I truly believe that. I think you can meet the right person wrong time. And then if it's meant, like my therapist would always tell me, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. In the meantime, continue living your life, chase your dreams, do things career-wise, do things individually, like buying a house in LA. And I just was very focused on Eileen and me and being the best version of myself, totally separate from any relationship. And also, I think it's important. I think sometimes when people break up, they think, oh, I'm going to change all these things about myself for the other person so that they can see what they're missing out on, so they can miss me, so they can want me back. And I felt like I didn't approach it that way. I truly just got to a point where I was like, okay, you know what? If this person's meant to be in my life, he'll be in my life. And whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And in the meantime, I just want to focus and be the best version, healthiest, happiest, most well-rounded version of myself. And I knew the list I needed for myself, if that makes sense. Like I knew the things that I still struggled with and I wanted to work on. And I also think it was very helpful for me specifically, breaking up and dating other people and being single for a while and then getting back with an ex, like, I actually felt like those experiences, even if during them and at the time it felt painful to know, like, someone you love is dating other people and stuff, myself included, I feel like looking back, I'm actually really grateful for that experience. I feel like I have gone out, I've experienced different things. I'll never be sitting with myself thinking, like, oh, what if? I'm a very curious, adventurous person. And I feel like I have experienced all these different types of people, and at the end of the day, like, I came back to this person and I want this person over other people. And just knowing that has been really, really helpful. I'm like, oh, I've gone out, I've met other people, I've dated other people, I've slept with other people, and I want you. I had a high school sweetheart, or a guy that I dated in high school, who at the time I really felt like I was going to marry him. And I think about it sometimes. I'm like, oh, what if I had just stayed dating him? And let's say we did get married. I feel like I'm the type of person where I'd be like, holy shit, have been dating this person since I was 16. I ended up with them. What else is out there? And I just feel like I would hit a point where I'd be like, "Oh my god, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need to go. Like, there's all these I have one life and I'm missing out." Which maybe sounds horrible, but so I kind of feel like I have this best of both worlds where I'm like, "Oh, I have done those things and I do know what it feels like and know what I want." So that has been really helpful. Again, I think getting back with an ex is not all rainbows and butterflies. Obviously, it comes with insecurities, and it's hard that, like, we have both dated other people. But as long as you, again, communicate, you know why it couldn't work between you guys, you feel like you're on the same page, and changes have been made. Like, I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. I'm definitely not the same person I was 6 years ago, probably even a year ago. And I think timing is everything. I'm grateful and thankful that he gets to experience this version of myself. Like, I'm very proud of where I am at in my journey and just who I've become. I also feel like when I was younger, I was a bit lazy, or I didn't think about relationships in the same way that I do today. Um, every day together, I feel blessed and lucky because, again, I also know what it's like to not be with each other. When you know what it's like to lose someone, or and you've lived years, months without them, it kind of almost sweetens it when you're back together. Like, I feel like I can appreciate the relationship so much more because I know what it's like to live without this person. And while I do feel like I was totally fine on my own, and if that was the way my life was going to go, I could survive and have a great life. But it's, yeah, just appreciating that's like, okay, I know what it's like to live without you. And I choose and I want to live a life and be with you. So that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like that's as much as I want to share. Obviously, because I got back together with an ex, I don't feel like it's the exact same as meeting or dating a new person in terms of, like, the conversation I would have to have about my mental health. This person has kind of been on that journey with me and knows a lot about my mental health. I almost feel like probably better than anyone. But again, it's just something we pay attention to, and I feel like I am comfortable to share what's going on with me and how I'm feeling. And I kind of think, yeah, like, if you want to get back together with an ex, to me, it was really almost just surrendering to life. And I feel like I just reached a point where I was like, you know what? If it happens, it happens. No stress. I'm not giving, like, any ultimatums. I'm not putting pressure on this person. I'm just like, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. I told him many months before we got back together, and I was just like, listen, he had some stuff he needed to tie up some loose ends, do some things before we could get back together. And I was just like, yeah, go live your life. I'm going to live mine. I can't promise that I'm going to wait for you. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And you may come back and say, hey, I want to get back together. And I may have moved on. I may have met someone else. So that's kind of the way that and I wasn't trying to play games or be manipulative. Like, I really felt that way. I just got to a point where I was like, okay, now I've lived several years without you. I know what it's like. I could totally see my life going this way. And I know that I still have very strong feelings for you and I love you so much. So, everything worked out. Feel like I'm on a great adventure. This episode is proudly brought to you by Lola V, an award-winning hair care line founded by Jennifer Aniston. So the entire line is naturally derived and plant-based, and it smells incredible. So I love using their restorative shampoo and conditioner as a perfume of sorts. There's nothing I love more, honestly, than like going to my boyfriend's house and him telling me I smell really good, and then it's my hair. So all Lola V products feature their signature scent, which is a naturally derived blend of herbal, citrus, and woody notes. So it's kind of like citrus, rose, lemongrass, green tea. The only way I can describe it is it's very spa-like, and it's actually inspired by Jennifer Aniston's favorite spas from around the world, which is pretty cool. I've also been using their lightweight hair oil. I was just on a vacation in St. Bart's, and it was like so hot and humid. And so to not let my hair get all frizzy, I used a little bit of their hair oil and it did the trick. So unlock Jennifer Aniston approved hair at lolav.com. As our loyal listeners, you'll get an exclusive 15% off your entire order when you use code GOINGMENTAL at checkout. So that's 15% off your order at LOLAVIE.com with promo code GOINGMENTAL. Please note you can only use one promo code per order and discounts can't be combined. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, and please support our show and tell them we sent you. Your hair will thank you. And so that kind of brings me to my next point, which is moving to LA. I bought a house, like I told you on a previous episode, but I bought a house during COVID. I was single at the time when I bought this house. I embarked on a multi-year renovation journey, which has come with its own list of challenges, probably been one of the most difficult things I've ever done. And as it's kind of nearing completion, I have these plans and it's a big financial decision. I can't just like keep an apartment in New York City and have this house that I've been renovating. So I made this decision when I was single that I knew when this house was done, I was going to move to LA. Obviously, now I'm in a relationship with someone who lives in New York. So it has brought up anxiety. And I don't know people who have been in long distance relationships, honestly, maybe you could write in or DM me or something. But I think there are fears and anxieties that come up when I think about like, oh shit, well, I made this decision and now I'm in this relationship and I don't really want to be in a long distance relationship. And so that's something we are deciding amongst ourselves what we're going to do. But I just think also, I'm 28. I feel like I'm quickly approaching my 30s and sort of this next chapter in life. And I have this house, and it was just like boom, boom, boom. All these major decisions kind of just started to feel real this summer. I feel like before I was like, my house kept getting pushed back and, we have 3 more months, we have 6 more months. And now it's like almost done in 2-3 months. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, scary. And at the same time, I feel very incredibly lucky and privileged to have this beautiful home, and I know how blessed I am, and I have real fears and anxieties. And I think it's just scary to like grow up. I mean, I've lived on my own for the last 10 years, but it's kind of like, okay, I I feel like 2 years ago when I bought the house, I kind of felt like, oh shit, I'm biting off more than I can chew. And now I'm like settling in. I'm like, okay, wait, I can actually see myself with the house, and I can see myself, in the next couple years, like maybe taking next steps in my life. And it's just all sort of settling into place, but in a way that you're like, am I ready? Am I ready emotionally? Am I ready as a person? Am I continuing to grow? Am I reaching like career goals that I want? How are my friendships? How's my relationship with my family? How do you maintain all of those things? Being in a more serious adult relationship now, that brings its own challenges. And so, yeah, there's just like a lot of balls in the air. I'm very excited. I am launching, I know I've spoken about it a little bit, but I'm launching a company in the fall, which has also brought a lot up for me. And being working in a startup world and being an entrepreneur, and I'm just like, am I capable? Am I going to do a good job? Is this what I really want? Just big life questions and decisions. And at the same time, I feel really lucky that I even get to sit down and think about those things, because I know a lot of people who kind of, I feel like, don't ask themselves those questions and do feel a little stagnant in their life. And I mean, sometimes I wish I could quiet the voice in my mind a little bit and just be able to sit with myself and be like, oh, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job, and you've come a long way. But that's not really how my mind works. It's like, well, you could be doing more, and well, this didn't go as planned, or this is taking longer, or you blah blah, you're a failure, you're an idiot, la 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 la. So it's kind of like quieting that voice in my head, reminding myself of my accomplishments. I feel like we can all do this. Journaling. I've been writing a lot. I really want to write a book one day. That's kind of been a dream of mine for a very long time. And I always knew what I wanted to write it on, but not the structure. And I now have figured out kind of the structure I want to write this little book on. So, and I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I saw a psychic years ago who told me I was going to write a book in the living room of my new house. And it's funny, I have like a book agent. We really want you to write a book and blah, blah. I'm like, no, 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 no. I do want to write a book, but I need to, I need to do what the psychic wanted me to do, or laid out for me. And I don't know if it was bullshit, but I'm going to run with it. And I just have this like feeling, and I'm not even a spiritual person at all. I wish I was more of one, but I just have this feeling of like, I'm going to move into this house. I'm going to write this book in the living room. And that's like I don't even know if I'll ever publish it. We'll see. But that's kind of my plan for the next few years. And I have been writing almost like blog entries just for my private consumption, and I share them with my boyfriend. But just like funny experiences or horrible things that have happened over the past couple months. Like, I had this really weird, awful evening running into someone who just was awful, and I wrote about it in a way that I think was pretty funny. But I don't want to like put it out there, at least not in its current form. Like, I think I would maybe save a story like that for this book. And so that's just like a personal project. And I feel like everything I do has always started as a personal project. Like, even this podcast, I was just like home at my dad's house. I had just discharged from McLean Hospital, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I just sat in a hospital for 5-6 months, and now I'm going back to real life and I don't know what I want to do. And then I started this podcast. And this is so random, but on Saturday night, I went to a party. My boyfriend and I went to a party, and Esther Perel was at this party we were at. And so we were like hanging out with her. And I was just like, what is life? Or what is my life? And we were with these neuroscientists and a couple psychiatrists and having this really interesting conversation about AI and consciousness. And actually, one of the neuroscientists I exchanged numbers with because I want her to come on the podcast, because just even this conversation we were having at this party was fucking incredible. I was like, I never want to leave this little group circle. And it was funny. We were talking to the therapist and they were like, oh, well, what do you do? And then these like brilliant, it's like Esther Perel and this amazing, accomplished neuroscientist. And I'm like, oh, well, I have a podcast on mental health. And they're like, oh, that's so great. What is it about? And I'm like, well, it's actually from the patient's perspective. But so I think sometimes in those moments, I'm like, I don't know. I actually feel I have gotten a lot more secure with what I do. I used to have a lot of imposter syndrome, but now I feel confident in this podcast. It's not about making the most money and selling the most ads or getting a big network deal. Like, I genuinely do it because I love having these conversations and I'm eager to learn and share my findings and meeting cool, interesting people just in my life and having them come on and talk about themselves. And I just think the human experience is so fascinating, and I love being able to share it in a medium like a podcast. If I felt like I was an incredible writer, maybe I would share it in that format. I don't think I'm the best podcaster, but I think it's interesting to hear people's own stories and their voice, and it's exciting. So I also feel like I will be able to dedicate a lot more time to going mental when my house is ready. My house has taken a lot of my mental capacity, and trying not to let my mental health teeter on that and just staying steady through the stress and through a stress where in the past and several years ago, I actually don't think I would be able to stay steady or maintain my mental well-being. And so just kind of knowing myself better, knowing what works for me. I still do therapy twice a week. I still take Lexapro every day. It's important to me to maintain my friendships and see my friends. And I actually saw a friend of mine 2 nights ago, and she was like, do you feel like you're able to maintain work or like continue working in your career when you're in love? And she was like, that's my problem, is I have difficulty being able to hold both those things. And I was like, you know what? That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that. And I feel like I have been able to manage it more than I ever have before. Like, in a perfect world, and I think when I was a lot younger, I like wanted to live in the fantasy of like, yeah, like especially in high school, let me skip school every day and hang out with my boyfriend. And like, it's like this euphoric feeling of being with him, and you complete me and you make life worth living and you're the only thing that's okay in my life. And now I'm like, no, I have real responsibilities and I have multiple jobs going on at once, and I need to continue them. And also, the person I'm dating has responsibilities and a career himself. And so making sure we kind of just only add to each other's lives. But it's also something I discuss with my therapist, with my friends, with my boyfriend. Part of growing up and getting older is figuring out that balance. And I can't even imagine once you have kids, like what a wrench that throws into the balance. And so to me, I'm just kind of figuring right now, I'm just trying to maintain the balance of my life. And I feel like I give myself a pat on the shoulder. I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of it. Okay, and finally, I wanted to leave you guys with some of my relationship advice as someone who struggles with. Oh, by the way, I know I spoke about the party where I ran into Esther Perel and a bunch of people, and it was so funny. I looked at one of the therapists and I was like, oh, yeah, I have this podcast about mental health. It's from a patient's perspective. And they were like, oh, if you're comfortable, like, what do you deal with? And I was like, oh, I have a personality disorder. And they were like, oh, borderline. And I was like, yeah, do I have it tattooed on my forehead? But I thought it was pretty hysterical. I wasn't offended. So I would say my biggest tips for when dating someone with BPD, or also dating as someone with BPD, is learning, and psychoeducation is so important. So learning about what borderline personality disorder is. I have a really awesome podcast episode on it with a doctor from McLean Hospital, Dr. Brandon Unruh. And there's a lot of misinformation online, so I would go to like reputable sources such as, McLean Hospital has a really great information. In this episode, he shares a lot of sources for accurate information on BPD, because there is so much stigma and a lot of inaccurate stuff out online. So I would say learning about it, and honestly, this is something you guys could do together. There's some really great YouTube videos. I think it's called Borderliner Notes is really awesome, and just like learning more about your vulnerabilities. There's great books on it. I would say understanding what triggers you as someone with BPD. So I'm very aware of like what my triggers are, and they've also changed as I feel like I've gotten healthier and kind of really been able to manage my BPD symptoms. My triggers have evolved and lessened, but in the past, if I felt like I was getting triggered, let's say triggered by abandonment. So, and it seems so silly, but like very specific words, if a boyfriend of mine would say them, like I'm over this relationship or I'm leaving or something you would say in a fight, really triggered this like abandonment wound for me. And my reaction was like very, very extreme in those moments. So as I've been able to, one, just work on not having my reaction be so extreme if that gets triggered, has been helpful. And that's something that you do individually in therapy, but also for my partners, like, hey, this is just something to watch out for. And like, I would really appreciate if you try not to use these, like, it's gonna elicit this type of reaction. And so if you could just be like careful not to use these types of words, or when you're really angry with me, maybe like walk away to cool down and don't say this type of thing. So that's something that I've been able to work on. Limits and boundaries. So when I was younger, I feel like I would do anything to feel better, say certain things that even in the moment I didn't realize, and I did feel that way, but it was like manipulative and to elicit like a specific reaction. Let's say a boyfriend did trigger that abandonment wound, then I would say something like really extreme to get them to say like, no, I'm not leaving you, or I love you. So I think that's something to again talk about together, and like talk about kind of boundaries. Being honest and vulnerable is like the only way to go here. And the fact that I can be honest and say like, yeah, some of that behavior was manipulative, maybe not on purpose, like I didn't have malicious intentions, but it was to elicit a specific reaction. It was, I needed this from you to calm down, and I was going to get it however I needed to. Validation is a big one. I feel like when I was younger, I needed constant reassurance of, oh, this person loves me, loves me, loves me. And I needed, the word is like teleological reassurance. So people with personality disorders, and I know specifically borderline, have difficulty with object permanence. So once someone is like, someone, my boyfriend could be like, oh, I love you so much. And then as soon as they leave my apartment, and they're not in front of me or telling me that, it's really hard to hold on to. So someone explained this to me once as like cupping water, holding water in your hands, and it's like it seeps through your fingers and it's like really hard to hold on to. And that's kind of how I feel like with validation or expressions of love or reassurance. And so again, it's something I think you have to be willing to work on individually as someone who has the disorder, and then something you can talk about with your partners. Like, I'm very into love languages, and that's something I talk about with my boyfriend or have really laid out for him. Like, I struggle with this teleological thinking where it's like it's not real unless I can see it, feel it, hold it. So, my love language is like, yeah, of course, I love words of affirmation, but I also really love gift giving. And it's not about necessarily like that it has to be expensive or fancy. It's more like even a written card is something that in those moments when I feel like I can't hold on to your love for me, I can revisit the card or the letter. Or like my boyfriend got me this hysterical poodle teapot, and like it sits in my kitchen, and I'm like, in the mornings I can look at that and be like, oh, it's a reminder of our relationship and like his love for me. And so, kind of those knowing your shortcomings and then coming up with ways to combat them. So, that's been really, really helpful for me. I'm like, what are the other love languages? There's touch, words of affirmation, gift giving, and I feel like there's another one. But for me, I like really explaining that to him was very helpful, and like he understands why. I'm not like, oh yeah, I want you to go like buy me a Chanel purse. I'm like, no, I just want you to like write me a letter, or if you're on vacation or you're away for a weekend, to know that you're thinking of me. Like, oh, I saw this funny little a lighter and I thought you would like it, or it reminds me of you, so even when you weren't with me, I was thinking of you and I brought it back for you. So that's something that we like to do for each other. Um, and I kind of feel like that's just like advice for any relationship, like really just being able to communicate. I feel like when I was younger, and obviously when I didn't know what was going on with me, like how could I communicate these things to a partner? But I also had a lot of shame. Like I felt like, oh no, I'm crazy. If they knew that I struggled with these things, then they won't want to be with me, so I have to hide it. And that just made my life a living hell and being in relationships really, really difficult for me. And now I feel like I'm able to serve it on a silver platter and be like, hey, these are my issues and this is how I'm working on them. And if you don't feel like you can be with someone like that, I understand, even though it sucks. But I feel like I'm with someone who is very open, loving, and understanding about all the things that I deal with. And so couldn't have found a better partner for kind of what I'm talking about. And there's such a freedom in not having to hide yourself from who you're with, which I felt for a really, really long time. Yeah, I think so much of what I struggled with when I was younger was dating these guys. And I was in relationships for years, like years and years. And then I felt like, wait, they don't really know me. They know one side of me. And only when things get really heated, or like when we are going through the breakup, are they see this different side of me and they're like, whoa, I don't even know you. And that was very disorienting for me for a long time. And I think a lot of it just came from this internal shame of, one, I didn't really truly understand what was going on with me, obviously, and that it's incredibly treatable and there's amazing treatments available. I mean, I've said this before, I don't even meet criteria for borderline personality disorder anymore. So if that's a testament that if you put in the work and you get the right help, you can completely beat this disorder. I just feel like I would never, ever, ever could have imagined that I could be navigating and being in relationships in the way that I am now. Could I date someone with borderline personality disorder? I'm like 100%, as long as they were working on themselves. I think it would be difficult, in all honesty, to date someone with severe untreated borderline personality disorder. You have to want to change. You have to want to put in the effort. I've had friends reach out to me about family members going away for treatment or themselves going away to treatment at like McLean or something and asking for advice. And I'm always like, it is a lot of hard work to change. I view it as addiction almost. It's like people don't change in rehab unless they want to. Like they don't beat their addiction unless they want to. Because at the end of the day, like you have to contend with yourself. And it's really, really painful. It's really painful to have to sit with yourself and look in the mirror and look at the parts you don't like about yourself and make the decision to change them. Because so much, I think, of these disorders of addiction, all like a lot of mental issues is this like avoidance and wanting to run away from yourself and the parts of yourself you don't like. And so having to really sit with those painful feelings, sit with the anxiety, sit with like the self hatred, and like learn to tolerate yourself is like the first step to learning to love yourself. And it's not easy and it takes a long time. And I know that I'll continue to be on this journey for probably forever. I don't just feel fixed. Like things still come up all the time for me. But I am very proud of my progress. And I feel like I'm living a totally healthy, fulfilled, happy life. Like I truly feel happy. And there were times in my life where I never, ever, ever could imagine feeling the way that I do today. So I hope that's not too sad. It's kind of therapeutic to talk about it like this. I feel very excited and happy, and maybe I will give you guys a tour of the house. I was thinking of starting a Patreon channel. Like I have actually a bunch of episodes. I like finally recorded that episode on why I left Dear Media, and I was going to put it on Patreon. So you guys will be the first to know if I do put that on Patreon. I love you so much for listening. I'm trying to push myself to do more solo episodes. I know you guys know that it makes me a little bit uncomfortable just because I feel like my awkwardness or my insecurities come out a bit when I'm like, it's not normal to just sit in front of my computer and talk for an hour to myself. Like I'm hyper aware of the fact that that's not very normal. So I feel like I come off a little anxious. But yeah, if you have any more like specific questions when it comes to, getting back together with an ex is a big one, doing this move, which I'm nervous and very excited about. And it's summertime. My birthday's coming up in a month and a half. And I just feel really content and peaceful with where I'm at in life. I'm excited for what the future brings. And I really appreciate you guys for being here and listening and supporting me. And I'm super scared, but very excited to share this project that I've been working very hard on that's coming out in the fall, which like gives me heart palpitations when I think about. But thank you so much for listening. I will be back next week. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Talk soon.